COVID-19 has changed how we work and interact with colleagues. This also presents an opportunity to reshape and reinvent the workplace. In the next panel discussion, we hear from industry leaders on how they're keeping their organization's culture alive in this new environment. Ripple's Senior VP of People, Places, and Communication, Kiersten Hollars, will moderate this panel. She'll be joined by Lebel, Chief Human Resources Officer at Capgemini Group, AXA Group Chief Operations Officer, Astrid Starner, Hans Braun, Head of Enterprise Innovation and CIO for Corporate Technology at Bank of New York Mellon, and Jolene Chen, Chief Human Resources Officer at Prudential Corporations Asia. Let's go over now to Kiersten and her panel to discuss this topic.
Thank you so much and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today at Singapore FinTech Festival's Talent Summit. As you know, I'm Kiersten Hollars, Senior Vice President of People, Places, and Communications at Ripple, and I'll be your moderator today. As you heard, we're here today to talk about how to keep an organization's culture alive in the age of COVID. What we've all learned in the past 9 months and how we're all keeping a strong company culture without in-person connection. To set the stage, this is obviously a topic every company has dealt with, from startups to the biggest organizations in the world. We have 4 esteemed panelists here today, 2 of whom actually don't sit within the HR organizations. I myself have had an unconventional path to HR for many years within communications, but I think we can all agree on one thing, that from the outset, creating and maintaining culture doesn't reside solely within HR. Or any one department. It's all of us. So throughout this discussion, we're going to focus on a few key areas: how we're reconciling business continuity with cultural continuity, changes in corporate culture as a result of this pandemic, and efforts to rebuild in a virtual hybrid environment that we're all living in now. And finally, the evolution of our workplace now and in the future as we all start to think about what reintegration looks like. With that, I want to start with a few quick introductions to our panelists. Anne, I'm going to turn it over to you to go first.
Yes, hi everybody. Very exciting to be here today. My name is Anne Lebel. I'm the global CHRO of Capgemini, which I joined actually in July this year. So I'm one of the few people who decided to move right during the COVID crisis. Prior to that, I've been in consulting and in HR for about 30 years in different industries, in the pharmaceutical industry, and then in the financial services, mainly in insurance and banking.
That's great. Welcome. Astrid.
Hello, I'm Astrid Stange. I'm the COO of AXA Group. And you may know we are a leading global insurance asset manager. We are roughly around 108 million customers. We're in 57 different countries, so we are a very decentralized organization. For that reason, I guess culture is a topic. And myself, I'm responsible for technology, data, and operations at AXA.
Welcome, thank you. Hans, why don't you go next?
Hi, Hans Braun. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Enterprise Technology, as well as the head of enterprise innovation within BNY Mellon. And actually really sad to be doing this virtually, because usually every year I used to do this in Singapore in person, but been very impressed with how the sessions have been going so far.
Could not agree more. And finally, Jolene, welcome.
Hi, hi everyone. This is Jolene. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer for Prudential PLC. I'm actually currently based in Hong Kong. So it's currently about 2:45 a.m. in the morning. I'm responsible for the HR functions across the US, UK, and Africa and Asia. And of course, Prudential is also a leading life insurance and asset management company. So very glad to be here with all of you.
Great, and a special welcome to you at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think that's amazing. I think we've covered almost every time zone with this panel. It's very impressive. So very much appreciate you all being here. So to kick it off, why don't we talk a little bit about how we're all reconciling our business continuity with culture, and how we're balancing it. I'd love to hear from a few of you about some of the biggest challenges the organization has faced in these past 9 months, and things that you've learned along the way. Just a couple key learnings. And why don't we start with you?
Okay, so I guess we will all have some of the key challenges in common. Basically, we are in the service industry. So our biggest asset is, of course, our people. And culturally, or very often in the service industry, people used to work from offices and not from home. So when it all happened and when the lockdown started for us, the biggest challenge was to mobilize all our people during the first 2 days and to get everybody set to work from home. That means bringing home 270,000 people from all around the world. And amongst these 270,000 people, half of the headcount is, or almost half of the headcount is based out of India. So we had to make sure that we would keep our employees safe. That was the first thing. We had to make sure that we could equip them to work from home, and that we could also manage that they could keep delivering to our clients. And we also had to work with our clients to make sure that that they would accept our people to work from home and to be set with the right security as well. So that was right from the beginning. And then, afterwards, we had to make sure that all our employees kept, let's say, engaged through that difficult time. And that's where I believe that empathy, human touch, attention became very important. One of the key learnings for us was, first of all, to see that our employees could keep working, keep selling, keep delivering to our clients, would stay engaged and committed. And perhaps more importantly for me, it revealed great leadership and great people management skills as well.
Astrid, I know working remote wasn't necessarily a new thing for you and your company, so I would love to hear how, if anything, has evolved in these past 9 months.
Yes, like Anne said, I think the first challenge, of course, for all of us was, even if roughly 30% of our people were absolutely used to doing that, to bring the other people, first of all, technically remote. So that means we have to accelerate the usage of Teams, to make the network safe and everything around that. And you told about security is a very important topic around that. And then we did it in a very short period of time. So that means from 1 day up to, and we have also teams in India. And there it was also a question of, are they allowed to work remote? Because we have also service companies. So I think that was the same challenge. But I think it went very well. For me, it's because we are used to that. It was quite great to see that people are very, very fast in that. So using technology, using the Teams stuff, we are using Teams. So for that reason, using these platforms where we are around, that went very well. But of course, even people who are used to do that found out when you do that the whole day, so really not just 1 day or 2 days or some hours a day, it's a different challenge. How to organize meetings, how really being able to have ideas, spontaneity. So not just being transactional meetings where you have a topic, then you work through, go into the next one. And I think this is something that is, I guess, also the challenge for the future, because this is still something that we are working on, how to make that happen. And I think when we talk about innovation, I guess you're on the same, Hans, thinking about how to make innovation happen in such an environment. When you usually have innovation, it's also spontaneity to meet people in different environments, by chance and not just by the schedule. I think that was our learning about that. So it works pretty well. Our productivity is super high. So this is not the issue. The question is how we manage these additional things when we come into new ideas, connecting people spontaneously, ideas.
And Hans, you come from an interesting perspective. It's more from the technology perspective. And can you talk a little bit about how technology played a role sort of front and center as we immediately worked sort of unexpectedly went to the entire team working remotely?
And I think the challenges everybody faced were kind of rather similar, just kind of listening to. First is, you know, we operate in 35 countries around the world. We have lots of people who, in effect, we pivoted to be in a full work from home perspective with 95% of our staff working from home within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. Then it's how do we look at the technology that enables the relationships that have been forged in the office to sustain and allow employees to kind of just have the space to still be their whole selves wherever they are. And so we kind of spent a lot of time, and to the point, real leadership in terms of how do we look at our culture carriers within the organization? How do we look at setting the boundaries that basically allow people to switch off? How do we look at basically making sure that the security, the work that needs to get done, gets done? How do we pivot from the importance of what work gets done as opposed to where the work gets done and still maintain those self-same parameters? So I think it's not just technology led. There's a huge element of real humanness that was needed in order to basically make sure that people felt safe, people felt comforted. There was a great amount of uncertainty, but still work needed to get done. And that required leadership at all levels of the organization. And, I kind of, really proud to see how we as an organization have come out of it.
That's great. And Jolene, any unexpected, interesting learnings in the past 9 months?
Yeah, if you look at our nature of our business, I think there are a few things that we did. I think, first of all, I think from the spectrum of customers, we one of the few that we look at offering cash benefits, hospitalization allowances, and extending premium payments in terms of insurance to help the customers. We have about 15 million customers across the world. So I think that's the first thing we did. I think also very quickly, we help our distributors and our agents. How can we look at remote selling? That was a very innovative and adaptive tool that we did almost immediately to engage across the world to allow us to do that. And that, I think almost today, about 90% of our products are being sold online. So that was an accelerated change that we saw in the countries that we operate in. And of course, then, what we could do for the communities. I think like all of you, I think for our colleagues itself, it wasn't that usual that for working remotely. So it was a challenge initially. It ranges from all sorts of problems and especially some of the homes where it's not big homes and you have 4 or 5 people working at home, right? That does cause a bit of problem. So we did a lot in that space. And I think today, I don't think we will revert to what it was before. They will set a new norm, at least to 40% or 30% of people that will be working from home. But I agree with all of you, right? That human touch, I think, is so important in this time of crisis. Yes.
Right. And on that note, I'll throw it out to the entire panel. As it relates to human interaction and the human touch and communicating, were there special programs or unique perks or incentives that you gave to the teams that perhaps would help keep them motivated and engaged? Anything new that you added in these past 9 months?
I can comment for us. First of all, in my view, it radically changed the way we communicate with our employees, because, of course, we did set up a lot of town hall meetings, virtual roundtables, and so on and so forth with our employees, but also with our clients, by the way, to keep the connection as alive as possible. But To that point, I think what was really different was that managers started communicating more directly, more transparently, and across all hierarchical lines. So that's a big difference in my view. Second is that we had to switch immediately all our training programs to virtual. And actually, we used a lot that time to upskill and reskill many of our people. We introduced a new learning platform that we call Next internally, where, I mean, since March or between March and now, we have more than 70% of our people who have actually used it. We introduced some new programs as well for managers, one that we call Connected Managers, that help managers lead in a virtual or hybrid mode. And I would say on top of that, many informal things that took place, and lots of well-being activities as well. And as we monitor engagement every month to make sure that people stay connected and engaged, there's also a lot of specific activities or initiatives that have been taken based on the feedback that we received throughout all these months. So yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight.
So I'll add, and it's actually quite interesting you kind of talk about, I think there's an element of, you've got to create the infrastructure that basically allows those organic connections to happen. And you know, those organic connections are both in the personal life as well as in your home life. So I make my children take their ballet, kung fu, whatever classes it is virtually. I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but apparently it is. And those organic connections that occurred in people's personal lives also managed to bleed into your work life. So, you know, your commonly held assumptions of what was possible virtually were challenged in your personal life, and that basically made it easier to kind of come back. Now, as an organization, the thing we had to do was make sure that the platform, the infrastructure, the support was there to allow employees to be able to engage. And I think, you know, it's the point you made, how we train, how we connect, that radically transformed. I also think, very similarly, it's actually made it a lot easier for the organization to be more flat, because communication now has to have everybody in the room. So there's no more out of room conversations. There's no more meeting before the meeting or meeting after the meeting. Everybody's in the room. And, you know, I love that, you know, and it makes it a lot easier to get to the end state. People are more productive. People are more focused. People are more respect. And also, just thinking of it, it's basically generated a lot more patience. You know, it's to the point, everybody's home conditions very different. And, you know, we've all had those meetings where the dog kind of comes in barking, a child runs in with their homework and says, this is important, must be done right now. But it kind of has given everybody the space to connect on a level that probably they haven't done so before. With people, they haven't had the ability to make that connection. And that, I think, has generated that human touch where it's not only sustained it, but it's actually given us a different perspective. And I think after this, to the point, Jolene, you made is, I don't think it's going to be the same. You know, it's going to be a little bit different. How different? How much of it is, you know, how much of it is remote? How much of it in person? How do we interact? How do we look at relationships? How do we sustain them? That's all going to change.
Yeah. So if I may just add on a little bit to what you said, Hans, is that I think somehow this pandemic has actually brought the whole organization closer. So what we did was that during this period of time, we also actually refreshed our purpose, which is helping people to get the most out of life. But yet at the same time, we said what we could do to engage 14,000 employees across the world. So we did a quite a massive 72-hour crowdsourced conversation across the organization. And you'll be surprised that everybody came on. We had lots of comments. It ranges from how many coffees do you have in the morning, to serious conversation about psychological safety, to things about commitment to the purpose and about co-creation of workplace. So we didn't think it was, actually when we first launched it, we didn't think that was going to be that meaningful and we would not have that many comments, but we were surprised. And there were very constructive feedback. And I think this also says that it's a big shift in how we connect and communicate across the organization, across all levels.
So perhaps, Jolene, you mentioned something, it's mental safetyness, and this is for us a topic. We take it that also as an organization because I think mental health is a topic that is not really that people talk about, that it's really still a difficult thing to talk. And for us, it's as an organization, as a company, a topic, but we have now learned also because of the crisis that we are really talking more about that internally, that we're not saying, okay, we have a study about that, but we see it because in this situation where our people, we all are in, we have run a study in Europe. It's quite interesting because usually there are the most part of the population are resilient people, so up to 80–90%. But you have seen in this crisis, even resilient people have started to struggle. And for us, it was really a topic to address that to our organization, by that leaders and senior leaders also have said, hey, I come to my boundaries, I come to some situations where it's very difficult, and to make it as a topic really visible, to articulate that. And what we have also done, what we're doing is supporting leaders about that, because I think it's really coming from the leadership that leaders are really able to talk about that, say it's okay and that we also developed a lot of support functions around that. So for that reason, that was for us also something, not just to talk about that as an insurance company, as a provider or as a company that provides support professionally, but seeing that it's a key topic also in our organization internally.
And you're all from global companies, and I wonder, did you have to tailor programs and messaging based on where your offices were located and what regions your offices were located?
So maybe
so perhaps I begin?
No, definitely, please go.
Perhaps it's quite interesting, this question, because for me, and perhaps it depends from company to company, even if we are in 56 countries, AXA has a very, very strong culture. So it's really interesting to see that, because whenever you go into an AXA branch, wherever you are, a company across the world, people are really thinking and acting in the same way. So for that reason, it's a quite interesting question. In our case, I would say no. So we have not the case, because in my own team, we're in 16 countries across the globe in all time zones. And you have seen that was not a need to do specific around that. So I think it was a global topic, global needs that we have seen. So perhaps it's a specific, every company is a little bit different, but that was our learning about that.
And I would say the same. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that probably isn't too different, because I think the fact that the whole world was going through it at the same time and it wasn't localized to specific geographies basically meant the challenges were roughly very similar. And then I work for an organization that has been in existence for 236 years and has continuously innovated in order to stay in business for that long. And I think the culture within an organization really determines how an organization responds to the external stimulus, whether it's, I kind of look at it, we've looked through Spanish flu, this one, world wars, and so on, but to still persist, that organization, the culture actually also dictates. The downside, the other part to basically really note is there is a localization that's needed in order to be sensitive to how different geographies are coming out. So as we talk now, Asia is at a different stage in the pandemic than I am here in the North America, that probably India is. So just that level of sensitivity requires an element of local leadership. But the fact that we're all going through the same challenge, I actually think has normalized it and not necessitated too much of how we need to localize the trainings and so on.
So I was going to say that, as you said, when we had a common purpose, and that's a North Star that we have, I think that's important, that guides all our communications, and how you expect the organization to show up as well and provide that safety for people. But I think what we'll do is that we do localize it to bring out the relevance in the countries, as well as the bring to life stories, the narratives at the country level as well.
And if I can complete, I would say that we didn't have to reinvent or to adapt or customize global programs locally. No, I mean, Capgemini has also a strong culture, and it's a culture that is very much based on human connection, people connection. It's a network, it's a culture based, it's a very informal culture, very much based on the ability to build relationship and to build strong networks. And despite the distance and the virtuality of everything, it worked, and we didn't have to change the way we work, finally.
Along the lines of culture, Hans and I were speaking earlier, and in addition to COVID, I think right at the beginning when we all began to work remotely, we had Black Lives Matter and many protests, certainly in the United States, where I am, and I'm wondering for each of you, how did the role of diversity in your culture, did that play a big role, and does it still in the conversations as we're all working remotely? And Juan, since you and I were having the conversation earlier, I'll start with you.
So, and it's actually really, I kind of said at the start, my family and I moved to the US in July last year. And so we came through, we moved into the US, we settled in, COVID hit, Black Lives Matter hit, and I kind of think the world changed. And for us as an organization, diversity is not just important, it's essential. And in my particular business, the work that I do, having diversity at the table ensures that you have the right outcome. Diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of race, diversity of gender. The greater the amount of diversity in the mix, the more innovative the idea, the better the outcome, the more perspectives are brought in. And so suddenly coming into an environment where everything felt like it exploded, the one thing I was really encouraged is the private sector, and at least I look at our organization, kind of got involved. Conversations that were previously probably had at a more localized level became more global. Perspectives at very senior levels were part of the narrative. We started to look ourselves at the lenses of how are we actually moving, and it's a real thing. It's not about saying, it's being anti-racist. It's how do you bring that anti-racism and proactive anti-racism into the conversation? And it becomes a very personal thing within organizations, and it's a very personal thing for me as well. But it really makes a difference if everybody leans in. And I think during the pandemic, all of these things happening at the same time kind of caused us, society as a whole, to lean in. It also made us question just beyond diversity, what are we doing to this planet that we live on? How are we being good custodians of the planet? How are we being good custodians of society? How are we being good custodians of the culture that we live in? And what kind of thing do we want in the future for our children to go into, for organizations to grow into? And it became a more loud part of the conversation. And that for me is a good thing. Now, there are things that we do need to fix. There are things that we do need to do, but I'm actually just really enthused by the fact that the conversation is being had, and it's being had more systemically than it's probably ever been before.
Other thoughts on this topic? Or in addition to COVID, other topics that we've seen more prevalent in our workforce and with our employees in these past 9 months?
So first, for me, when we talk about diversity, I fully agree. And I think the more diverse an organization is, the more resilient an organization is. And what we have seen in this kind of crisis mode, because that is exactly what happened, and it started, of course, in Asia, and then came across to Europe, the US. For me, it was quite interesting that our teams have connected very fast. So what we have seen is, because this was a situation where nobody has an idea what is going on, that was not really, there was a cookbook or something where you can say, I do exactly this, and that will happen. So for that reason, what we have seen is a kind of very fast learning organization where people really brought ideas in, and from the different kind of markets, from the different kind of backgrounds, and that people really fast connected, take over, learn together. Of course, sometimes failed when I remember what we have thought in March, what about this crisis, what we know now about COVID and how to behave that. And that was for us a great learning about bringing all of the ideas to the table, learning from each other, being very fast on that. That was a very, very experience that our organization have made within the last 9 months. And I think that makes our organization much more resilient than before.
Yeah. I think what really impressed me is the resilience that the organization showed during that period, or for now. Beyond diversity of all kinds, I think it has pushed us to be more inclusive, more importantly. And I was mentioning earlier that finally, there's no more boundaries. Communication is more direct. People stay connected to each other, whatever the place, whatever the localizations, and with higher intensity. And there's more attention and more empathy that have been developed as well. And that's different from the old normal.
I think one of the things is that because of ability to use technology to have meetings remotely, we are able to engage a lot more people in designing our products, innovation, and application itself for the customers. And so in that sense, much more inclusive, because you won't look at your traditional product designers or the actuaries itself. You actually cast that net wider to other individuals who are interested in this. And so henceforth, I think this has allowed us to be much more inclusive and create a sense of belonging.
I think I could not agree more with the panel. And I think something that we've done a few times throughout this process is we've surveyed our employees, and we're trying to understand engagement level and how employees are feeling. And I wonder if any of you have done the same, and what those results look like and how that will impact the future of the workforce as we think about reintegrating back into what a new normal will feel like, either back in the office or a hybrid approach.
So we have a process of continuously, listening to our employees. So it's not kind of like the large one-time surveys. It's a continuous listening process, and that's kind of embedded at every level within the organization. And we take, we take really great pride in making sure that we pivot and we actually undertake actionable things that basically link the response to the survey back to make sure employees feel like that not only does their opinion matter, but the actions are going to happen as a result of it. But then that in its own, I think, in a way, it's not enough, because it's more, how do you pull that all together and, understand the specific context that individuals are going through and how that kind of relates back to whatever responses they've given or whatever outcomes they're looking for. And so I think there's a lot of learning that needs to go through in this whole process, and because everybody's at a different stage. And I made the comment right up in one other talk I was in that everybody's experience of this lockdown has been different. Somebody living in a funky apartment in New York by themselves, with all of the telecommunications needs, with, deliveries that come in from whatever supermarkets and so on, gets a very different experience with somebody who's maybe going through a lockdown in a place that doesn't have that infrastructure. So their feedback is nuanced to them, and how you as an organization are able to support your people wherever they are, and I'm a non-HR person, so wherever they are is not only important, but it's the difference between good and great. And so that part for me is like, it's just, the surveys are great, the actions are great, but it's just making sure there's a lens that basically looks at the individual and the clusters of individuals to make sure that you're actually really addressing their needs.
And I think you were going to jump in.
Yes, we listen to our employees continuously as well. And I mean, we survey them on a monthly basis. And what we could see is that actually the level of engagement has has continuously increased throughout that period since we started. Of course, it also increases because we take action on the feedback and on the results. But I mean, it also gave us great indications that it was very important for us to learn quickly from that crisis and to start immediately building what we would, how we would see the new normal taking place. Because I mean, of course, we will not get back to the old normal. So we've actively taken these lessons and started building. We've actually put in place a specific project on that we call New Normal, we have started building the future steps on many different dimensions.
Another thing is that because the hours are so long in the day, actually, if you are in a global role or even a regional role, right, you could be working and you can be on air on time on almost like 12 to 14 hours. So it can be quite stressful, I think, for a lot of individuals. So what we have done is that we have actually tried to set aside what we call people time. What that means is that there shouldn't be any meetings in that sense. It's for you to engage your team. If not, and so that you show some care and some concern, rather than be on calls throughout the day. And I think that helps. Just 2 hours in the day, morning and in the evening itself, once or twice in a week itself. I think that was something that we did that people appreciated. Another thing we did was that because you operate over a number of time zones, it's to allow common time zones so that we are a little bit more conscious of each other's operating hours in that sense, especially when you have to have Asia time zone, UK and the US. So we try our best to accommodate within a time zone in that sense. Another thing that we have looked at is we have an app that you can give feedback immediately after every sessions that you have or every interaction. And that kind of help that continuous engagement as well. So just a few things that we have done to kind of help that, to increase that level of engagement as well.
So our experience is perhaps the same like Capgemini, because of course we are also asking on a constant level. I think this is something what companies always do. But of course in this crisis, it was more the question about what is really the feeling about that. So coming really from how do you feel about that? Are you still engaged on that? And we have made the same experience. The engagement is increasing. And I think it's also the feedback about taking care of people, the safetiness of the people, how we are also preparing the offices when people want to come to the office. I think everything was reflected. And as you said, because we are also starting the discussion then about what do you think about the new, and what is the new normal is, I think, is always a discussion. What is it? Is it hybrid or how does it look like? But it's quite interesting that in our case, really, we have asked people, do you like to continue working also remote, hybrid in that environment? Because of course, not in all the countries is at the moment the standard, because due to working laws, because you have also realities around that, because you have contracts around that. And we got the feedback from our people, 90%. So that's, I would say this, all of them said, okay, let's go for that. Let's change it. Let's work on that. And this is exactly what we're also doing, thinking about that, because it's also, we're not talking just about, I think we're talking about two things. We're talking about culture, and culture is collaboration, but it's also about leadership. I think it's a question about how is the role of leaders has to change, or will change, because I think it will not stay in the same way like in the past. And we have all discussed, I guess, about new way of working for years. And the second thing is, of course, what do we do in an office in the future, and what an office looks like? Because I think still in most of the offices you see desks. And the good question is, do you need a desk in an office, or what do you need there? Because what is the way of working then remotely, but also when you come to an office? And this is, of course, depends on business models, on who's working on what. And this is a discussion we are on. So up to rebuilding or refurbishing or remodeling office space, but I think it's about all facets regarding about workplace.
Right, and Astrid's touching, it's a perfect segue into sort of the final topic I want to talk about. I mean, we're all hearing news about potential vaccine in 2021 and what the workplace environment and workforce will look like in 2021, and how do you see that changing and evolving, and also how has this pandemic sort of changed the role of an HR person? Are those lines blurred? Is it all about, as Astrid pointed out, all of our leadership and what that looks like? But I'd like to first hear from the panel about how we're thinking about reintegration back into the workforce and what that even looks like, both physical and our teams.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, we will not get back to the old normal anyway. So we will not get back to the office like we used to go to the office every day. So definitely we are reinventing a different model. This is about mixing or combining work from home and work from offices, but also making sure that there are touch points for employees sometime. If I speak for Capgemini, we will not go for a full work from home when the crisis is over. Let's put it this way. But we have started looking, let's say, business by business and type of function by type of function at what is feasible and what is also feasible for our clients. Because if it doesn't work for our clients, it doesn't make sense for us to work from home. That's one thing. The second thing is that crisis has opened for us the opportunity to work also, let's say, anywhere to anywhere. So when you have consultants that are based in some locations, until now they were mainly working in their, let's say, geography or in the same geography. From now on, we can do it differently, and that means also that we can bring expertise or use our experts differently. Of course, we will use the workplaces in a different way, because if we don't need to be at the same place to do at least part of the work, there's a few things that probably we need to do together. We were talking about innovation. We were talking about starting new projects. And I think that requires also to rethink our workplace differently. So many different dimensions to take into account. And I think it has to be very specific to each company and to each kind of business.
So I'll kind of jump on that. And, I kind of, in my perspective, it won't go back to the way it was. That's for definite. The society, we companies have received stimulus, we've responded, adapted, and that adaptation will persist with us. On the other side, I think the real pivot, at least I see, is the movement now is what work needs to get done versus where is that work done. Whereas I think previously there's a huge emphasis, probably societies-wide, where work gets done. I think that, where work gets done is going to be less of a conversation. However, during the pandemic, we've also seen establishing new relationships virtually takes a lot more effort than sustaining existing relationships virtually. So sustaining relationships virtually is a lot easier than starting new ones. However, the new tools that have come in and that we've been using during the pandemic phase to enable collaboration virtually, whether that's Teams, how we do whiteboarding, how we do video sessions, how, all of those things have also given us a new muscle that kind of adds up. So I kind of think, depending on what work needs to be done, who needs to be involved in getting that work done, how do you start it off, how do you look at ideation, the platforms that you use, how do you bring that new part of digitization into the process? I think all of that is going to make things different. Now, I kind of really, I look at us as a company. We've learned a lot with our network of innovation centers that we have globally in terms of how do we interact, how do we ideate, how do we bring people together, and how do we extend that concept virtually as well as physically, and how do we blend those two? So we're kind of exploring the same perspective in terms of how do we look at what work gets done, where it gets done. But it's definitely not going to be the way it was before. It's going to be different. My hope is it will be a lot better because we'll take a lot of what we've learned, add it to what we already knew, mash them up together, and get something that's way better than what we had at the start.
Yeah. So if I can just add on to that, a few things I think that we're already experiencing. Hiring practices have to change. This is going to be the new norm. Ability to hire through a video and maybe not having seen the person. And that could extend to all levels of employees. That is very different. The way that you engage is going to be very different, and how you onboard individuals. So I think it will also, it's a paradigm shift, I think, for HR professionals in terms of mindset. How are you going to change some of these practices that we have had for so many years into quite different areas of focus? And so I think the connecting, the grow, and how we reward people, I think all that practices might need to have a shift. I think that's, for me, I think things we need to focus on. And I think a few things I would just want to come back on, which is purpose, right? That the values and the purpose of the organization will need to be even strengthened so that it can reach everyone in the organization, because it's not going to be physical possible for you to engage in that way. So I think those are some of the things that as opportunity for us, if you talk about in HR professionals, we'll have to look at.
So we're just a couple minutes out. I was hoping we could complete the panel with just to hear from each of you your biggest takeaway in the last 9 months from going through this pandemic that none of us thought we'd find ourselves in, for sure, 9 months ago. If there's one big takeaway that you could have told yourself 9 months ago, what would that be? Astrid, why don't we start with you?
So it's a little bit difficult. There's so many takeaways, but perhaps coming back to the discussion, I think my takeaway is it's still about human beings. And what I mean with that, it's about, I believe that human beings, we still need being connected. And connection is, and as you say, Hans, it's about when you meet new people, it's very difficult to be connected if you have not met physically. So it's about connection, physical connection stays. It's also about emotions, a lot of things to touch people. So even if I believe, and at the moment I said, for me, in my organization, where we're looking at the productivity on the highest level ever seen. So I have no doubt about that the machine is running. But what you see when you talk to people, they're missing this connection, this personal interaction, because this is the stuff that also keeps, and Jolene, what you say about purpose, that keeps an organization together. And so this is for me, this kind to manage both, so that we're saying, great to have technology, great to have all these opportunities to work 24 hours with teams around the globe, but how to keep this glue, how to build this glue, what we need as human beings, what's super important for us.
Other final thoughts from the panel?
If I may, for me, it's leadership and human touch as well. Leadership, because we will have other crises, no doubt. Finally, we will all be able to make it and to go through it until now. And it's also because it's also when we have great leaders that are able to, let's say, help manage all that uncertainty and this crisis, but also help manage the human side of these topics. So.
Well, I think we are out of time, so I will leave it on that note. And I just want to extend my appreciation to each of you. I know that, again, we're at time zones all over the world, so I really, really appreciate it. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It will be a challenge to maintain the organizational culture while the workplace is becoming more distanced or remote. Thanks to the panel for those points on how to protect the valuable culture of your organization.